now listening to the Gabba Gabba Talks podcast, where we bring you conversations with people connected to the Carolinas underground music scene. Hey there, and welcome to episode 4 of Gabba Gabba Talks. This past weekend, my band, Van Huskins, went into Dead Peasant Studio in Elkin, North Carolina to record 6 new tracks with Brandon Hamby. Brandon is a guitar player for Graves of Gods and the former guitarist for the Seduction and End of All. After we recorded, I sat down with Brandon and talked about his bands and the studio. Now, I'm not going to keep this introduction too long, but before I get to this week's episode, let me go over a couple of things. This time, we experimented a little bit and used a single mic to record both of us. Now, the unfortunate thing is I didn't really pay attention to the levels a whole lot throughout the whole recording. We pretty much just set it up and recorded in a very casual atmosphere. The microphone liked my voice a lot better than it liked Brandon's, although I think I fixed it and everything sounds pretty good. Each episode I record is a learning process, and I take everything that I learn to the next one. Also, on this episode, a few of the songs I played a lot longer than normal. Most of the clips are still about 30 seconds, but since Brandon runs the studio and he's recorded all of this music, I wanted you to get a good opportunity to hear how good this stuff sounds. I highly recommend seeking out any of these bands that he's talking about and support them. Go see them live, buy their records, stream their music on Spotify. We artists appreciate support in any way you can give it to us. Now, before I get started, just want to remind you to listen to the Spit in My Face podcast. You can hear it anywhere you hear this podcast or at spitinmyfacepodcast.com. Frankie Pointless brings you the best punk rock you've never heard. And when I'm not super busy, I usually bring you a segment on there as well. You can check that out. New episodes drop on Saturdays. Now let's get right to this week's episode.
This is a whole different, it's still very much you guys, but it's, at the same time, it's like you said, it's a progression. Like, you can really hear that.
It's a little bit more, like I said, it seems more serious to me, although it's not really any more serious than anything we've ever done.
No, well, I mean, musically, it definitely is, man. I mean, they're the songs themselves, most of them are longer. Yeah. They're more arranged, like, as far as, like, what you're doing in the songs.
Yeah, there's different parts to them.
Yeah. You know,
definitely not just verse, chorus, verse. There's like, okay, so we're playing this that sounds real kind of spacey and melodic, and then all of a sudden it gets fast and kind of all over the. I don't know. I'm having fun with it.
It's great, man. It's brilliant, man.
So Brandon Hamby.
Yep.
So I first met you when you were playing in a band called the Seduction.
It's unfortunate.
One of my favorite North Carolina bands for sure. I still love that. It's so good. Mm-hmm. And then we recorded with you, and a lot of people record with you. That's probably where most people know you from, is from Dead Peasant Studio.
Yeah, at this point, I've been uniquely fortunate in the fact that I live in Elkin, a small town, and I've had a lot of people come here, man. Yeah. And that's great, and I love it. It makes me feel great, and I always really want to feel pride in what people do here. And it means a lot, man. And people keep coming back. So hopefully something's going right.
Something's definitely going right. You said you do it. That Trash Room album, man, it's phenomenal the way that thing sounds. I was blown away. I'm like, hell yeah, he's good. He's learned some new tricks. I want to see what he can do. I want to see what he can do with Van Huskins again.
Yeah,
so.
I most certainly did, man. The last Trash Room record turned out really good, and I'm just really excited about it. I went back and listened to the first one in comparison, and I feel like I know all those guys really love the first one, and I do too, man. Like, in that was kind of like a turning point for me then, but their new one is also a turning point.
Yeah.
You know, I feel like you can hear a clear progression from that stage to this stage, you know. And, you know, those guys, we were talking about it earlier while we were tracking you guys, you know, Mike's got a clear vision, man. Mm-hmm. You know, he knows what he wants, and you know he hears it in his head, and if it ain't right, you know, we just keep chopping away at it.
And he'll be the first to tell you that.
Oh Lord, I love Mike, but he totally will, man. He's got his clear ideal about the situation, and I love that, man. I love Mike. I love the fact that he knows that. But you know, and a lot of the thing about Trash Room, especially with this last recording, is that Mike, you know, for months, like, he would send me stuff like, listen to this, you know, and kind of get an idea. And we go back and forth, and, you know, we'll you know, talk about tone sometimes, just, you know, not even in context of recording, but just, you know, kind of back and forth, you know. And all of that extra kind of time put in really showed up on that record, because everybody had a clear idea when we were going in, more what we were shooting for and stuff like that with it. But I feel really good about that record, man. I think it turned out great. It was a really good experience.
Yeah, both those records they're both very good. I know I listened to like even the Hooligans CD that you did.
Yeah,
that sounds badass too. I
Thanks,
mean,
man.
I just everything you do sounds great.
Thanks, dude. I really appreciate that. It means a lot.
I guess I always like to kind of talk about where you got started. How did you get introduced to like underground music, the kind of music we play these days?
I mean, all that stuff kind of ties in together, especially with me. So I'm originally from like the western end of Wilkes County. I grew up between Wilkesboro and Boone and Ferguson, like halfway up 421 Mountain.
It's kind of a small town away from, because I grew up in Kings Mountain. It's about 30 minutes outside of Charlotte, but far enough away that we were not really exposed to that kind of stuff.
And the same thing, and I mean, in Wilkesboro there was no ideal of an underground scene. You didn't know about bands, and unless they were like mainstream bands. And I originally got into music. My parents grew up blasting classic rock and stuff like that. And, my original loves were bands like Pink Floyd and Led Zeppelin and Thin Lizzy and things like that. And I still go back to those bands. They're still some of my biggest influences and things that I listen to on a daily basis. But when I decided I wanted to learn how to play and really get into playing music, I have an obscure family background and things like that, and I was really isolated as a child. So, I was frustrated. Most people are when they learn how to play. Kind of need an outlet, need something. And that was kind of part of that. And I saw music as a way to express whatever I was thinking at the time, and really got into it. I was probably 14, 15 years old when I started learning how to play guitar. And I was listening to music before, and then I was even listening to like metal. I listened to like Metallica, pretty generic stuff at the time. And I remember I was pretty young when Nirvana was, blown up and huge. So, but I remember the first time I really started listening to Nirvana, man, I just got obsessed with it, and loved them. And, I really kind of got to say that they were a big part of what, inspired me to play guitar, because I saw it more as an expression. It was more of a, you felt like this dude was pissed off, or, whatever it was at the time. And so I got into punk and really enjoyed, being from a small mountain town with no education on underground scene, like we were into like NoFX and Misfits and stuff of that nature. And that's what I grew up learning how to play. And I met a guy when I was a little older. I liked some metal. I liked like Sepultura and Metallica, and things that were pretty accessible. You could go to Walmart, and buy the record, or like a small CD store or whatever. And anyways, his name was Tommy Church, and Tommy, he's the best guitar player I've ever met in my life. I've never seen anybody like him. He's a total. You really meet someone every once in a while that like that's what they're meant to do. They're meant to be doing this, and that's how Tommy was with playing guitar. And Tommy, for whatever reason, liked me, and he was like, "Oh man, you ought to come play with me." And he was playing with a band in Mount Airy, and I think at the time they were called Hour of Chaos, and but it was a lot more progressive, a lot more metal. I was playing in like a punk band, know, and I wasn't used to anything of that nature, and I was very uncomfortable about it. But he kind of fucked me up, man. He was like, "Well, you got two choices here, man. You can keep doing what you're doing, or you can come on tour with me." And I was like, "Well, fucking, I want to go on tour. I want to play shows, So I joined their band and started playing with them, man, and we became into Vol. And we played a little bit, and we signed to a local label in 2000 out of Greensboro called Tribunal, which at the time was like a pretty big label in the Southeast for like hardcore, metalcore, underground metal. And that whole process was a huge education process for me. I discovered so many bands, played with so many bands, and met people that, I'm still friends with to this day.
Yeah.
Through that whole process. And, I was 17 years old when I did my first tour.
Wow.
Yeah. And I look back on it now, I got a kid, and I'm like, what the fuck was my parents thinking? But, it is what it is. But I think they knew that at that point, you just couldn't stop me.
Yeah.
I was just going to go. It didn't matter what was said. You
Yeah.
know? But so I got into underground, and they kind of helped me, force me further into underground, and I brought some stuff to them that they had never heard. At the same time, there used to be this really cool little CD shop in Hickory, and I can't even remember the name of it, but it was like across the shopping complex from the mall. There's a shopping complex on the other side where Circuit City used to be and stuff. And I'll never forget, this little CD store was like a Dean guitar dealer. They sold a bunch of Dean guitars in the back and stuff. And they had like this underground metal section. And you could go in there, and like, this was before like MP3s or any way to demo a record. Like, you go in, and like, I'd save up money, and I'd go in, and I would look at like the covers of records, and I'd be like, oh, that cover looks cool, I'm going to buy this record. Yeah. So a lot of times I would buy shit based on like, I don't know even what this genre is. I bought Vision of Disorder's first album that way. Yeah. That green, or not the first album, but the Green Drop record. Everybody, I don't even remember what it was called, but everyone talks about that one. But I remember, as silly as it is, I bought Cradle of Filth's like Dusk and Embrace. And this was way before they would break out into like mainstream and stuff like that. And I got into like black metal and stuff like that, and all kinds of like crazy stuff, which I would eventually like drag to this band and, help incorporate and turn all those guys onto it and stuff like that. But, that's kind of it, man. It was just, I was always, I feel like every kid sort of feels this way. You want to find a band that your friends don't know about.
Exactly, yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
We went through a lot of that. And a lot of you'd buy stuff, just like you said, because of what the album cover looked like. Yeah. Like, oh, man, this looks like so much more sick than the one that he bought last week, so I'm going to buy this. Yes. And it'd just be... Sometimes you'd win, sometimes you'd lose.
Yeah, I lost a lot. Like a whole lot. But every once in a while, man, I'd land on something that was just pure gold. Like, I remember Cradle Filth was definitely one of them, which, I mean, they become more of a parody of themselves later on. But at the same time, at that time, Dusk and Embrace was a great album if you were in that genre of music. And the one that would follow it up, Cruelty and the Beast, that album is just like, I mean, if you're a musician and you like aggressive music, get past the vocals if you hate it. That album is fucking brilliant. Like, it's incredible. But I found like Meshuggah, Destroy and Erase, improved that way, before they would blow up and stuff like that. And, kind of incorporate it to my friends. But yeah, it was always like, it was almost a game, it's like, can I find something that my buddies don't know about? And be like, hey, have you heard this, As much as it is like, I guess that's the hipster thing now. Like, I liked this before it was cool, you know? But
we did a lot of that. But we also had like one buddy that also he would do the same thing. He would like come to us and be like, "Hey man, have you heard this cassette?"
Yeah.
We'd look at it and go, "No, I hadn't heard that one yet." That's pretty good, isn't it? I don't know. I haven't heard it yet.
Right.
But he was like always trying to impress us with what he got. I was like, oh, okay, man, whatever.
Yeah.
For some reason, we didn't let him in on the game, and then we'd like go, oh man, that band's actually pretty good.
Yeah. I hate to kind of admit it on the back end. Oh man, well, everybody had,
I think he had Sepultura. He was like the first one that bought Sepultura, and they're like, oh man, they're not that good.
Oh,
like, man,
whatever.
Sepultura is fucking awesome.
Yes. Yeah, I remember, man, the first Sepultura album I got was Chaos AD, and that album fucked me up.
Yeah.
Like, it totally rearranged the way I thought of metal, because before that, like, metal to me was, I listened to Slayer, and I listened to old school Metallica, and, stuff like that, but to me, Chaos AD was like a precursor to American hardcore in a lot of ways. I mean, I know American hardcore was pulled out of like Black Flag and all these other, New York, scene bands and, things that would, happen around the country in just these small pockets. But Chaos AD, I think it was like 93 or 92 that it was released. I mean, it sounded like albums that were coming out in like 2000, 2001.
Yeah,
you know what I'm
really.
saying? Like, it really...
It was way ahead of its time.
Yeah, completely ahead of its time. And, that was the first band, I'd listened to punk that had been like chaotic in its nature, but Chaos AD was chaotic sounding, but it was very tight and organized. And that would really go on to inspire me. Like, that would inspire me in the Seduction with wanting to use like feedback and stuff like that, to see like the chaos as an instrument in itself. Like I do that in Graves of Gods now. Like there's a lot of parts that are, I mean, for lack of terms, like they're direct ripoffs of what I grew up with Sepultura, you know. So I mean, all that stuff, it sticks with me. You know, it was like tools that I stuck in my little box that I would bring out every once in a while. You know, but yeah, man, I love that. I kind of, you know, in a lot of ways, like I love the internet and I love the things that it's done for music because, you know, even Interval toured a lot and we did a lot of things and was, you know, fairly successful and all that's thanks to the internet. But I miss that trading records with friends. You know what I'm saying? Like, you know, your buddy went out and bought a new record and he burned it or made a tape for you, you know?
Yeah, we did a lot of that.
I remember sitting around like 106.5 when it first came out and they had like their local section and sitting there with a tape deck just waiting to fucking hit record on bands that I thought was going to be cool and stuff like that, you know, and be just ripping shit off the fucking radio, you know.
Yeah.
But, you know, that was a really cool experience and I'm sure that stuff's shared at the same nature. I mean, like I have no lack of finding new bands, you know. I always pick people that I records brains like, well, what's inspired you? Like, what made you write that riff? You know, what was that? You know, and so there's a lot of stuff I lift off of that. But you know, there was something about that felt like very, and maybe it was just the time, but it was very like organic. Like, man, I made you this tape. Listen to this. You know.
Yeah.
So when I played in Interval, and like we were part of this huge underground scene that was really starting to get a buzz. You know, and this metalcore, you know, new wave thing that was getting ready to happen. And we played with all kinds of bands. I mean, we played with like, I forget who all was on the bill. It was something crazy. I think it was like Killswitch Engage. It was us, Killswitch Engage, Bludgeon, and maybe Shadows Fall, but I can't remember, at the Coffee Bean in Dobson, which is like 15 miles up the road. And like a place not much bigger than this. In like 2000, 2001. And that was before everything really kind of took off. But like I remember the first time I started seeing those bands on MTV2, it was like, holy shit, like what is going on here? Like they're actually showing like underground, like true underground metal. You know, I remember the first time I saw Lamb of God on it and things like that. Like I was floored. I mean, it gave me a lot of hope being a musician kind of in that scene, in that genre at the time. I was like, man, something's about to happen. Like this is great.
Yeah.
But, you know, it was cool, man. It was, I miss that. I really wish MTV would go back to playing music on that level.
Yeah, I guess now that everything's pretty much on demand, though, MTV doesn't, I mean, who's going to turn on the MTV just to see who what randomly? It's kind of like turning on the radio. I mean, there's not too many people that do that.
No,
I mean, I guess you do when you're driving around in your car, and most people put on MP3s or whatever.
Yeah. Well,
but I mean, if you want to watch a video, you're going to go on YouTube and search the band you want to see or the artist you want to see and watch their latest video.
I do. I'm guilty of that, man. I do Spotify, and what's really weird is, well, I mean, I guess it's not really weird. If I'm wanting to find new bands, maybe I'll create a new station for Pandora.
Yeah.
You know, load up some obscure band on Pandora and see who they feed me just constantly.
Yeah.
And I found some stuff that way, man. You know, that's a pretty good way to find new stuff. But, you know, still, my best way is always talking to bands that come in here. Because I'm always fascinated, like, you know, what inspires people, what makes them write and play what they do. You know, it always interests me a lot, you know. So I talk to people a lot about that, you know. So, and that's been one of the biggest ways that I've kind of kept going on, you know, with new music.
I think it's interesting the way that, like, the way people consume music has changed so much that trying to find a way to get people to consume or listen to new music is such a challenge these days. I remember I've been playing for almost 27 years now, so getting close to 30 years, but for quite a while. But it just seemed like when we were younger, if we recorded some music, all of our friends listened to our music.
Oh my God.
All of our friends love to listen to our music. Now, you know, I talk to some of my friends, and our last CD's been out since last July.
Right.
And every now and then I'll be like, so have you listened to that new Van Husken CD yet? Oh, man, I just haven't had time yet.
No.
Well, okay, and then I drop it. But, you know, how do you not have time to search Van Huskens on Spotify and hit play?
Yeah, you do have time, and that's the weird thing about, this kind of like what I was talking about earlier, about, like, there was a, you know, when you gave your friends a tape before the internet, you didn't have as many options, so you listened to it.
Yeah.
And maybe you liked it, maybe you didn't. You know, there's so many bands that I ended up not liking, but there's bands that I've went the rest of my life with, that I was massive fan of because of it, you know. And, you know, I do miss that because as funny as it is, music's more accessible than it's ever been, but it's harder to get people to pay attention to it.
Exactly. And I understand that to a certain extent because of the fact that it is so accessible and it is so easy to make music that anybody can do it these days. So you'd think you'd have to wade through a lot more crap, but the thing is there's a lot of really good stuff out there.
Oh, well, you know, so, you know, I've got a lot of friends that aren't in the music scene. And, you know, that's the whole thing. They tell me, like, oh, well, they don't make music like they used to. I'm like, what are you talking about, man? And they're like, well, you know, music from this time frame was the best music. I'm like, I can give you a list of bands that sound like they came from that era.
Yeah. If
that's what you're into, if that's what you're looking for. There's more, in my opinion, there's more good music right now than there's ever been.
Oh, yeah. Ever. I believe so. I believe that.
But the problem is there's just so much of it, and it's so accessible, and people are so flooded with it, they don't even know where to begin, so they just listen to Led Zeppelin again for the 11,000th time.
I fall into that trap for sure.
Oh, I'm guilty as shit. Yeah. And there was this really cool dude that used to come to a lot of the Seduction shows. TJ, I think his name was Worthington. But anyways, TJ was an older guy, and he was actually at the DSR 10-year reunion show. He took a lot of videos, and I think they're on YouTube if you want to check them out.
Yeah.
And TJ, when he would come to us with these shows, he was like in his 70s. But TJ would talk about it. He was like, yeah, I guess he told us this story one day. He used to own a record shop in Sparta, apparently. And, you know, some kids were asking him about a band, and he was very kind of closed off and closed-minded about it. And TJ was like, he realized, like, when he went home and he was thinking about the conversation, basically that he was what he used to kind of rail against, you know, in that whole, like, well, this is the best, and anything beyond this is horseshit or whatever. And he made a conscious, like a real effort to always listen to new music, you know, which I thought was a really interesting thing. You know, I'd have this conversation with this dude that was 72, 73 years old about Dillinger Escape Plan, and he loved him.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? It wasn't that it wasn't just like he wouldn't brush it off like, oh yeah, they're cool. He'd talk about like, oh yeah, this person was inspired for this part. I mean, like, he would dig in and research it. And like, that guy's always been an inspiration to me to always remember, like, as I get older, to keep my mind open and to listen to new music and not be so quick to be like, well, that's just a bad rip off of this, but just to listen, you know?
Yeah.
Because you can, like, especially the older you get, like, I catch myself doing it all the time. Like, you can hear the influences of other things in things. I'm like, well, if I want to listen to that, I'm going to listen to this. But, you know, that's, you know, we're all just playing, you know, so many strings and so many notes, you know?
Yeah.
Everybody's going to have their own take of something. I mean, that's, you know, I feel that very much about every band. I've never been in a band that reinvented anything. I don't believe in that. But, you know, we draw off our influences, you know.
Yeah.
And new bands do the same thing, you know, and I think that's great. One of the bands that I sent you in this playlist that I made is Wilma.
Okay, yeah. Oh, yeah, we played with them recently. Okay. They're excellent. I love them.
Fantastic band.
I'm taken by surprise. The veil has been pulled from my eyes. After all, my trust has been taken. I can feel the beast awaken.
All younger dudes. Mm-hmm. The singers sound like Chris Cornell and like Jerry Cantrell, but Lane Staley mixed up together. They're like early 90s grunge, Seattle grunge. Like, those guys came up here and recorded.
Yeah.
And I was just absolutely for it. I was like, I could not believe what they were doing, because I was like, you guys are literally playing like things that remind me of being 13, 14, 15 years old. You know? And it gave me a lot of like kind of like hope that, you know, these guys were really trying to dig into music that mattered to them or had like substance or whatever.
Oh, yeah.
Really projecting it. And Jonathan, who played with Seduction, he went on to do Paperback, and Paperback's in that same camp.
Yeah.
You know, as far as I'm concerned, you know, they're more punk based, but they've even, like, in their newer stuff, like, reeled back more into, like, a grunge kind of sound.
Yeah.
Not that it's about grunge, but, like, you got a set of younger guys really capitalizing on things that I think we all would have been doing in the late 90s, early 2000s, you know? Not being grunge necessarily, but punk, dirty punk, you know, rough sounding, you know, whatever it is, you know, that you want to call it.
Yeah, there's another band, the Wallburns. They're really good too. The show we played with Wilma, we played with them as well. But they're like, oh man, they're so talented, so good. Like Eli that plays bass. He knows things about the bass that I only wish I knew at that age. You know, things I'm just now learning at 45. I'm just now figuring out about bass, and I'm like, man, he's got it all figured out now. These guys are good.
Yeah,
and they write excellent music too. I mean, it's a little bit more radio friendly, sort of Foo Fighters, Queens of the Stone Age kind of rock, but I dig that.
That's okay, man. Well,
and they're good at it. It's catchy, and his Trey's voice is excellent. I'm really impressed with the.
Tell them to come here and record.
Yeah, I will. the kids that are in the scene these days, I'm super impressed. I wish there were more of them. One thing I will add to what we were just talking about was that, you know, I think the fact that people don't really buy physical media as much as they used to is another thing, that people don't have as much of a connection to it. And the fact that the same device that we use to listen to most of our music is the same device that a lot of people use to watch TV on, to communicate with their friends, to share memes with. Music's become more background, I think, these days for a lot of people, and they don't pay attention to it as much.
Music has, in a lot of ways, become the just soundtrack to your background life.
Yeah,
and it has. Music used to be something that was so important, man. Like, I was talking about. We talked about earlier about going to a record store, and you would pick up a record based on the album art and just hope, like, man, this is going to be something badass. Look at this art. Look at the thought that they put into it. Look at the artwork that they've done. I used to go home, and like I said, man, I lived in the middle of nowhere, so I would go home, and I would put a record on, and I would pull the artwork out of the cassette tape or the CD or whatever it was, and just sit and stare at it for hours and read every word of everything that they put in and analyze the artwork. And really, like, it was more than just noise in the background.
Yeah, it was more than just press and play and there's music. It was there's a ritual to it. And,
there was.
And, you know, like you said, the lyric sheet and the thank, I mean, it might be a thanks list that's you know, 3 paragraphs long, but you're going to read every name in that thing.
Perfect example of this is like, I remember there was they were calling for snow. We live in the middle of nowhere. Back then, they didn't really plow the road that we lived on. Like, if it snowed and it was a heavy snow, you were stuck for like a week. I mean, there was no getting out. And they were calling for like a huge snow, and I begged my mom, like, please, let's go. Let's stop at Kmart. Let's stop somewhere. Let me get a record. And I walked in and I bought Alice in Chains, Jars of Flies. You know, and I was probably like, I don't know, 15 years old, and it hadn't been out long. And maybe I had a hell, I don't know. But anyways, I remember thinking the cover looked really cool, and I'd heard Alice in Chains and was a big fan and had some of their other stuff, you know. And hadn't really listened to this album. It was an acoustic or clean record. It wasn't heavy like their other stuff or grungy, you know. And I went home and just absolutely got absorbed by this record. It snowed. We were locked in for multiple days. Couldn't leave the house. And I sat there with that record, and I cannot listen to that record today. without thinking of like A Foot of Snow.
Oh yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
I mean, it become like that record in itself with me, with Winter, it just become like an iconic staple.
Yeah.
I'm 37 now. Every time Winter gets here, I listen to that record, no matter what, because it become part of the fabric of who I am.
But if you'd had Spotify at that time, you would have listened to that one, and then you'd have went to the next thing, and you went to the next thing, and you never would have had that connection to Winter with that. You never would have had that personal connection with that record like you do now.
It would have never ended up meaning what it does. And ultimately, that kind of ties back into what I was going to ask you. Do you think the album format is dead?
I'd like to think it isn't, but it almost seems like it is. I mean, I honestly wonder why, a lot of bands spend a lot of time to record a full album when you can record 2 or 3 songs at a time and just release them however you want to.
I mean, and this is kind of counterproductive with me having a studio to even be asking these things. But, this is a question I've started asking bands, and I've started, I get varied responses, but, I've watched, I've recorded, like I said earlier, I've been really fortunate. I've recorded a lot of different bands. And one of the bands that have came to me several times, I'm currently finishing up their album right now, is a band out of Greenville, South Carolina called Black River Rebels. And Black River Rebels is more modern rock in their format and stuff, and they're just absolutely a great band and great dudes. And the first record they came up and done, we're on their second record now, but the first record, they would come up and they would record 3 songs at a time. And what they would do is they would release 1 song a month for 12 months. And at the end of the year, they packaged it all together and they released it as an album.
Yeah.
But essentially, instead of releasing it as an album where you drop 12 songs on people and like, here you go, and hope that it took off, they decided to do 1 song at a time. And that format really worked, man. I watched them do that, and it gave them something also. Every month they had something new to promote, something new to kind of advertise and push to fans, to always kind of be in their line of sight. And, it ended up being incredibly effective for them. And that made me start thinking about the context of an album. Like, what do we perceive it as an album today? Are albums worth the work and the effort that goes into them? Because, an album is a massive undertaking. I've recorded Nick Pugh and Nick's from another guy from Charlotte. He played in Jaggermouth. And, we was talking about him earlier today and recorded. Nick's just absolutely brilliant dude. And he's probably as far as a composer and songwriter, he's the best, one of the best I've ever seen. He's incredible. I cannot say that enough. But Nick, we spent a year plus on it, and he released his album, and it's doing good. He's doing good with it. He's working and touring it and stuff like that. But it almost seemed more effective to watch this other band to drop 1 song a month every month, for a year straight, and always have a reason to be in people's news feed on Facebook or whatever it is, So, I'm almost starting to feel like music's more like it was in the 1950s right now than what it is in 2020.
Yeah.
And the fact that music exists more as an ideal of a single than it does the record.
See that for sure. I'm personally, I'm a fan of the album format. I just enjoy hearing a group of songs that a band feels like these songs work together. When we did our last CD, one of the things I enjoyed about it most was figuring out what order we wanted the songs in, and I kind of put it together, and I've got a midpoint on that CD. Okay, if this ever gets pressed to vinyl, this is the end, and this is the beginning of the next side. So that's the way I look at it. That's the way I want to do it.
Yeah.
But I personally like that, but it's more, everything's more instant these days.
Yeah.
So staying in the public eye, I guess, or whatever, however you want to look at that, staying relevant. maybe is a little bit better than dropping a whole bunch of songs, because sometimes people, like they said, I haven't had time to listen to your CD.
Right.
Well, maybe if I put one song out, maybe you'd have time to listen to one song. So maybe they're onto something. Maybe it might be a way to do it.
And see, that's the thing. Like we were talking about earlier. Like I love, and to this day, it doesn't change. Like I got a stack of vinyl over there. Some of it's new, and a lot of it's from like the 60s and 70s that I got from my parents, and that I've added to and stuff like that. But I love the record, man. Like I'll still put on a vinyl record and open up the vinyl and just tear through the lyrics and the artwork, and just love stuff like that, and look for like the little hidden things, because bands used to think that out. Now you just think of like a cover that you can slap on Spotify and it's done.
Yeah.
But I loved the thought out process of stuff, that how much work used to go into it. But yeah, it's really weird, man. We're kind of in an interesting cycle where like it is more about, to me it feels like it's more about the single. I don't want the album to go away, but I don't know how do you bridge that gap between like you got to have a single every month or people don't pay attention, and an album unless you release an album and then just promote a single every month.
And I guess it's finding that balance too of how much people will take, because even like with doing social media posts as a band or with the podcast even, like I'm trying to find that balance of, do I post too much? Do I not post enough? How much are people actually going to see if I post all the time or if I don't post all the time? I don't know. There's that algorithm that some people think they can figure out, but I don't know that you can figure it out.
I don't think you can, because ultimately it's going to restrict your post to. If you're posting about if you have an entertainment page set up, if it's not set up as a private personal profile on Facebook and you post,
they want money. They want you to pay.
You have to pay for ad space or people aren't going to see it. As much as I hate to say it, we would do that in the Seduction. If we had a local show, if we had a show in Charlotte, we even experimented with this. We tried it back and forth to see what the difference would be. And we would have a show and we would promote it heavy but not pay for ad space. And ultimately, at the end of the day, we would have people like walk by Snug Harbor on Plaza Midwood and like see our van and be like, you guys are playing tonight? What the fuck's going on?
Yeah.
And it was because they hadn't seen it. But if we would drop $15 on it, next thing you know, everybody knew that it was happening. And I despise that. I hate that.
I'm super reluctant to do it. We did it. We didn't do it with the last CD. I just kind of let it be what it was. But I think when we recorded that Thray with you, I put $5 or $10 down on a Facebook ad, and for what it's worth, I don't know that we even got our money's worth back out of it. But a few people maybe listened to it that wouldn't have.
Yeah.
But every now and then Facebook says they'll give you a little bit of credit. You can use. I'm trying that right now with the podcast. So far, I'm not really seeing that much from it. I still think they want you to put more money to it.
They want you to, well, I watched from the beginning of the Seduction to now. I've watched it go from like, if you put $5 down, it's going to reach thousands of people, to being like, well, if you want to reach more than like 300, 400 people, you got to drop like $20, or whatever it currently is. But that number keeps getting a lot higher.
At the end of the day, they know that you're using their platform to promote yourself, so they want a piece of that.
Yeah, they absolutely do.
Not that there's really a piece of music out there. There's not money to be made in music these days.
Yeah, no.
Bands lose money recording and pretty much putting it out there for people to listen to for free. You'll have a few people that will buy a CD if you put it out, or that might buy it from Bandcamp and give you $10 for it or whatever. But most people, they're gonna wait for Spotify, and then when you put it on Spotify, they're still not gonna listen to it.
No, not really. But like as far as the studio goes, like I hate to say this, I probably even shouldn't say this on the podcast, but I've done better at the studio than I ever did as a musician.
Yeah.
And this was like back. Well, like, all right, so Indoval was a band.
You probably put a lot more money into the studio than you ever did as a musician as well.
Insane amount.
So there's that to be said.
Right, there is, and I'll never recoup it all back, and that's fine. And this is not about me making money. You can ask any band that I record and talk to them, and I don't charge a lot.
Yeah.
I try to be really reasonable about what I do, because I love what I do, and Like I was saying earlier, like I've had good experience. Well, I've had okay experiences and I had bad experiences recording before this. And at the end of the day, I always walked away feeling like maybe I didn't get what it should have been for the price that it was. And so when I started this, I wanted to make enough money to keep the studio going. I wanted to make enough money where if I needed to buy new preamps or new cables or a microphone every once in a while, I could.
Yeah.
But what I really wanted to do was, outside of that, I wanted to give bands something that they felt like, all right, this is what we really sound like. This is who we really are. So, and ultimately, you can't please everybody, and I'm sure I've had bands that walked away that was like, well, I'm not happy about this, or whatever. But I feel like most of the people I record ultimately are very happy. I feel like they're satisfied for because, and I always tell everybody, like, look, if you don't like this, if you don't like the way it sounds, if you don't like it mixed, come back in, man. We'll keep working on it until we get it right. And it varies a lot, and you can hear that. It's important to me that when you load up a mix like the files that I sent you, that it doesn't sound like, well, that sounds like Brandon recorded it. Like, I want it to sound like that band's playing. You know what I'm saying? That's what I want it to sound like. I want it to sound like your band at the best possible that you could be, but I want it to sound like your band,
And you have a way of finding that sound, helping bands find that
Thanks,
sound,
man.
or at least helping bands capture that sound.
Yeah.
It works really well.
Well, and that's something that's always been important to me. Like, as far as recording goes, like, people that influence me really heavy, my biggest influence in recording is probably Kurt Ballou from Converge, man, which I'm also a big fan, of Converge, and super chaotic, got that metal flair. Also kind of got a vintage old school thing in his tone, man. It's not always, Kurt Ballou's a real fan of like vintage amps and hitting in the front, like any kid would have done growing up in the 80s or 90s with a distortion pedal, HM2 or something of that nature to get the tone out of it. And his recordings always sound so incredibly good, but still at the same time they sound like a band playing in a room, Yeah. And I love that. That's what I always want here is I want everybody to walk away and feel like, man, I got my tone, I got this, I got that, or whatever. But at the same time, like, if you go watch a band that records here, I want them to sound like they were, that band. I don't want them to be like, oh, well, what the fuck's this? This isn't what, I'm used to listening to.
Yeah.
And so that's important, man. That's and there's different studios for all kinds of different philosophies. You can go to places that's going to, polish every aspect about everything that you do. But, I don't necessarily believe in that. I mean, rock and roll was loose and fast, and I like that in some aspects about recording,
That's a lot of fun. And it's real relaxed here, and we have a lot of fun when we record here and feel like we can just be ourselves and play, and we feel comfortable, and so everything went great today. It was great, like I couldn't ask for any better. It was, I think we only really restarted one song, and everything else was pretty much one take, and then fixing the things that been, the things that me and Eric screwed up. So.
No, man, y'all did fantastic. Y'all are a great tracking band, man. That's no joke.
It was a lot of fun. It really was. But you talked about, so you went on your first tour at 17.
17, man.
I never got to, I've talked to Eric about this. When we were younger, we've been playing together for a long time. Mm-hmm. And we were 19 when we first met and started playing together. Mm-hmm. We didn't take advantage of that time when we had less responsibilities to go and tour. We stayed here. The closest we got to a tour was we went and we played in, I think, High Point one night and Winston-Salem the next, or vice versa. And I think I lived in Chapel Hill at the time, or in Carborough, and I drove to one show on Friday night, drove back to Carborough, drove back to the next show on Saturday night. So we never really went on tour. But so at 17, were you still in school at the time? Or?
Well, I started school early, and I just had graduated, and this was all very fast. So I graduated. We got signed maybe a month after my graduation to Tribunal Records, and maybe a month after that, we did our first East Coast tour.
Yeah.
And that was a pretty wild time for me because everybody in the band, I was always the youngest one. Mm-hmm. Like, I've always, out of most of my friends up until now I'm the oldest one out of a lot of them. But, during that time, I was the youngest. I was the kid. Everybody was, 21, 22. They could all drink, and I was 17 years old. So, I got drug out on the tour, and it was wild. It was 2000. We did a tour with Bludgeon in Duval, and we the first night. Well, yeah, I think it was the first night of the tour was in maybe Christiansburg, Virginia, or not Christiansburg. What is it? Charlottesville. Anyways, we played with Every Time I Die. It was Burn the Priest, so that's Lamb of God. That was the band they were before they became Lamb of God, and us and Bludgeon and some other band. And the other band, and I can't remember the name. They were a punk band, and we basically were playing like in this second story or this like large open attic that had some sectioned off rooms that they were housing the show in. And I'll never forget that as long as I live, because like Every Time I Die, which their old stuff was cool, but I ended up becoming a huge fan of theirs later down the road. Their guitar players literally were like running and jumping into the sheetrock so hard that they were busting like human-sized holes through it. I mean, it was like the Kool-Aid Man.
Yeah.
It was totally insane, and these guys were like completely unhinged at the time, and it was amazing. And I felt so bad for the guy hosting the show because I was like 17 years old. I was terrified. I was like, what is going on, And then I think the next night from that was like Greenville, North Carolina. We played with a band that was from that area called 7 Ton Diesel. And from that point, we worked our way down to Miami and then back up the coast and stuff like that. And it was an incredible experience, and it in a lot of ways it warped me for the rest of my life. Like things would never be maybe normal. You know, because I got like this weird infection, and like I've talked to other dudes that's been in the same boat, and they understand and know. Like Johnny Moss is a perfect example of this.
Yeah.
Like Johnny will tell you, like if you don't get out on the road, man, you start feeling a little weird after a little while. And I spent years like that. So,
I envy that a little bit. There's a part of me that wishes I'd have had a taste of that.
It's good and bad, man. But I've slept a lot in some sketchy ass places. I've slept in some Walmart parking lots. I mean, we did the Seduction did this tour with DSR. I think it was in 2012 or 2013. Decided in February to go up north, for whatever godforsaken reason.
Yeah.
And so the first night of the tour was in Roanoke, Virginia, and then it was like Delaware, New Jersey, New York, and I think Massachusetts, and then we would come back. And we played Roanoke, Virginia, and then it just poured snow the entire time, the rest of the way up. Like we were following the storm front the entire way up. And by the time we got to New Jersey, they declared a state of emergency and was trying to close like I-95. We were the only vehicle out on I-95. But, we got to, I can't even remember the name of the town, but it was this club in New Jersey called the Meat Locker. And a lot of bands play there, and it's a pretty well-known club. And apparently they act as like a homeless shelter during the day. We didn't know that.
Yeah.
So we show up to this club, and, we're there a little bit early, and there was no snow. I mean, there's snow everywhere. You can't see where you're parking, so Daniel whips the van in, apparently drives over something that pops the tire, and we don't realize it at the time. Like, this gets really fucked up. So, anyway, so we go down to the venue, and we're banging on the door. And finally, someone jerks open the fucking door. They're half dressed. There's like a dim red light in the background. You can't really see them. They're like, "What do you want?" Screaming at us, and we're like, "We're supposed to play here. What's going on?" And so, anyways, we ended up leaving, and Daniel goes to pull the van around. Well, he's gone for a long time.
Yeah. Like
way longer than what he should be. So we go walking around looking for him, and we find him. He's stuck in this ditch because like the snow had turned to rain and then was turning to ice on top of it. And all the snow had been packed down into all the rain drains. So all of a sudden, while he was driving and this tire was flat, it gets stuck in this drain in this giant puddle of mud or water, whatever, snow, ice, mixture of shit. And he's having to change, the tire, and like all these cops are standing around and watching him. And the firemen show up, and those dudes were fucking badass, man. They were like laying down in the water with us and stuff like that. And I have like Converse, man, on, and nothing else. It's my only shoes. And it's like 24 degrees outside, and it's just absolutely everything's starting to freeze over real fast. And I'm laying in this water like with Daniel, trying to help him change the tire, and so the firemen are and stuff like that. We finally get it changed, and I'm like freezing to death. Like I'm don't know what to do. So I go back to the club, and like this homeless dude's like, "Hey man, take your shoes and socks off. There's a vent up here," and he shows me like this vent, like obscure dry vent. I tied it around some pipes and shit. That dude was awesome, man. He saved my feet, But touring can suck, man. I mean, it can be really rough. ironically, later that night, we decided to get a hotel room at the Hojo, like down the street from us, and we probably shouldn't have been driving. I think Daniel was the one that decided to drive. So Daniel sitting up front, and Adam Lane sitting up front, and me and Johnny Monster sitting in the far back. So DSR and the Seduction is touring in the same van.
Yeah.
And we're pulling a trailer, and it's a rear-wheel drive van anyways, and all this damn ass snow. And every exit we hit, like the van goes sideways with the trailer. I mean, like full on sideways. And me and Johnny's in the back just absolutely screaming, like, we want to live, stop. And Daniel, who's driving, and Adam Lane's up front screaming, we want to die, It was this very weird paradox. But, touring's infectious, man. And it is, and it changes you. Like, when I was young, like I said, I was like 17 years old when I went on my first tour. That was in 2000. And End of All lasted till 2004, somewhere surrounding there, and 2005 maybe. And even when it was over, I didn't stop playing music per se, like I always played guitar, but I stopped playing in bands for a couple of years.
Yeah.
And I that band was very personal to me, and I'm very good friends with all the people in the band, and they're very much my family. Like Jeremy now is the drummer that was the original drummer for End of All. He's the drummer for Graves of Gods.
Okay, yeah.
And so I mean, we in a lot of ways we grew up together. In that context, in this weird scenario.
Yeah.
And so when that band ended, me and my wife had met. We weren't married at the time. We were just dating, and we took a job together, even traveling, building low stores, and we did that for a couple of years because I got to the point where we would come home for a month and then go out for a couple of weeks or a month, and then come home for a month and go out for a couple of weeks a month, and we were touring pretty regularly and pretty heavily towards the end of All, and so if I came home and sat for more than a month or two, I got real weird feeling about everything. I got real like antsy about stuff, and it's actually took me a lot of time to kind of reel back from that and kind of readjust. But it's still at the same time, man. I'm always going to feel that. I'm always going to want that in my life to a certain extent. I don't know how to explain that. Like I got a wife and a child now, and I love them. I wouldn't want to, be out for a month at a time now, but, man, every once in a while that itch, it'd be killer to do a couple of weeks, And that's another thing that I watched decline over time. Like, so when End of All was a band, this was before the internet took off with music and before YouTube was a thing and before these things were really kind of such an integrated part in our lives. You could play a Wednesday night in Winston-Salem, and if 100 people came out to a show, that was a bad show.
Yeah.
Now if 100 people come out to a show, I don't give a fuck where you play. That's a great show.
If it's a Saturday night, that's a great show.
That's a great show.
Not a Wednesday night. Yeah, if you get 25
Saturday
people
night,
on a Wednesday night.
Lord, it'd be packed to the gills. You couldn't get through the doors,
Yeah.
And I mean, it really was like that, and I watched that decline. I watched the attendance of shows decline for that. And that, even more than the trading records, like I miss seeing like younger people experience that because to me shows are magical, man. Like you didn't know what was happening. Like you might go to the show, you might meet people, you make new friends.
We were talking about that last weekend.
Know what I'm saying? Like you might meet a girl. Who knows what's going to happen?
Yeah,
man? It doesn't matter. Like there was this vast array of opportunities by going to a concert, going to a show, and we used to do that. Me and Tommy used to do that all the time. The other guitar player for End of All, we would, me and Tommy lived in Wilkesboro on the far western end of Wilkes County, and we would go to Mount Airy to practice. And Mount Airy was about an hour and a half, 2 hour drive, depending on the traffic. And Mount Airy though was like 30 minutes from Winston, and we like a lot of times we would leave practice and it'd be like, well, let's just like don't even call it Ziggy's. Let's just drive to Ziggy's and who's playing it.
Yeah.
And we would do that all the time, and we would just drive to Ziggy's, hop in, watch a show.
That's what we used to do at Milestone. It was just, it didn't matter. It was, especially when we first started going, because it was Sunday nights were all ages shows.
Yeah.
So we could get in. We were under 18. And so it didn't matter who was playing. We were going to be out there.
Yeah.
We just wanted to be out there because it was like you said, it was magical just being out there. Because
man.
We were out there just enjoying the music and all the people, and just at the same time sort of feeling like we were accepted in this place that we didn't feel like we really we're supposed to be in? Like, is this really legal?
Yeah.
Yeah,
is this okay? Yeah, like, so I was going to Zegas like 17, and the bouncers were like, I know you go on, man.
But it's just I don't think people do that too much anymore. They don't go out. They don't go out just to see who's playing. They see if anybody's playing that they know, and then they decide whether they want to get off the couch or not, because they've got so many options at home between the Xbox and the phone in their hand.
I hate it, man, because like there's something about that interaction, and there is an energy to shows. Like if I go watch a show and I don't feel like a band has an energy, I'm not behind it. But the thing is, like a good show has an energy, it has a vibe, it has a presence there, and that presence conducts the crowd, whether it's to be hostile or friendly or whatever. I mean, and you go and intermingle in that, and you never know what's going to happen. It's always such a wild card, and I love that, man. And I miss those things, and that's one of the things. Like I'll say that with the Seduction, we ended up forming, I think maybe 2011 or so. We were a band for probably about a year or so before, like, we really started breaking into the Charlotte scene.
Yeah,
and we played a lot in Greensboro, and that was this kind of ties back to this, right? So we would go to the Somewhere Else Tavern and play all the time, and I'll never forget the last time we played there, and we'd been going there like once a month, once every other month, playing a show, and like the last time we played, there was literally not a single person in the room except for the bartender, and it was like, well, everybody was totally silent on the ride back home. And finally, we started talking, and it was like, so what are we going to do? We're going to keep driving here and playing this venue? We're going to keep doing this? Or we're going to start fighting for a little something different? And it was at that point that we really kind of turned our direction towards, like, going to Charlotte.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, being from where we are, I talked to Daniel. You can ask Daniel about this. Your biggest obstacle being a band in this region is your location. Your location is a massive crutch to you, because not only do you have to figure out how to make yourself a presence 100 miles away, whether it's in Greensboro or Charlotte or wherever you're playing, Nashville or wherever, but you have to figure out how to bust into their scene well enough to where they'll accept you.
Yeah.
And so at that moment, we decided, like, I was like, Charlotte, we got to hit Charlotte, man. Charlotte's where we need to be. Charlotte's where we need to be playing. It's a massive city. It's growing. There's a huge population. There's great venues. There's a lot of things to do in Charlotte, and that was at the time we started working and focusing on booking at the Milestone and working at Snug Harbor.
Yeah.
And actually how we even got in to that whole side of the city was going through the Common Market. Sarah used to run shows there, man.
Yeah.
And so we would go and do those shows a lot of times, and those were some of the best shows of my life, man. Like, I would never forget
I
that.
love playing Common Market. It's fun. It's a tight stage even for a 3-piece. So I'd imagine like a 4-piece.
Yeah.
But it's a lot of fun to play out there because you never know who's going to show up. People just randomly show up for that, and everybody seems to have a good time.
No, man, and that was why it was free to get in. People could just come in and watch.
People are out there anyway, so they can walk back there and watch the band for 5 minutes.
And we had so much great stuff happen because we played at the Common Market, and so that spilled over to playing the Snug and the kind of growing and developing in that scene. But it became a thing for us, or at least I felt it did. That when the Seduction would play, especially in that, because we considered Charlotte our hometown. I mean, even though Daniel was from Sparta, I live here in Elkin, but I'm from Wilkes. Jonathan lived in Wilkes, and Jacob lived in Winston. So we were very spread out demographic in this region. But we always considered Charlotte home, because that was where that's where we put our roots down, you know, and I wouldn't change that for anything in the world because, it treated us like home. Like once we kind of got in, everybody there was so good to us. It treated us so great. And, it got to the point where when we would play, you would feel like this vibe about the show, whether it was like hostile or whatever, everybody trying to have a good time or whatever, man. There was always like an energy. And that's, back to what I was saying. I love shows with energy. I love shows with some form, something. Like I want to feel something. Show. I want to feel whatever it is, you know, whether like, oh, man, I need to stand back here, I'm going to get punched in the face, or like fucking everybody's buying everybody rounds of drinks, whatever it is, you know, I want to feel that, you know.
Yeah, I know, like, even to this day, anytime the Seduction gets brought up, you know, everybody has good things to say about how much they love that band. So
thanks, man.
You guys definitely left a mark on Charlotte for sure.
Well, thanks.
So that's good.
Listen up and I'll let you in on the secrets that I know. Sexy ways to find no one who we wanna own their soul. You gotta give them what they never had. No need to explain. Sometimes there's pleasure and pain. These are the rules of, these are the rules of, these are the rules of enslavement. These are the rules of.
I mean, yeah, we were kind of lucky because we're fairly close to Charlotte. I mean, I'm from Kings Mountain, so a little bit farther than Gastonia, but we're still within very easy driving distance. So we kind of grew up going to shows there. But even Gastonia's got, you know, a fairly decent little scene there. Well, we got one good place to play right now. We might have two soon. We used to have two. But like Freeman's Pub, it's just great. We can always play out there. You know, he's got shows out there every week, but it's usually not necessarily rock shows.
Right.
But, you know, he's kind enough to let us do our punk rock shows out there once a month or once every couple of months. So, you know, we've got that. It's you know, I imagine like up here, it's a lot farther from everything. So you've got a lot less, or used to have. I guess you said you've got a nice little venue now.
Well, yeah. So
But it's different than like punk rock venues.
So Elkin doesn't really have a music scene outside of like country music or bluegrass or things of that nature. And then even in that context, you're not going to see a lot of live bands here unless you go to the Reeves, which is in downtown. The Reeves Theater is like an old movie theater that they renovated into a music hall.
Shelby's got a place. It's the Don Gibson Theater.
Yeah.
And it's a nice little place like that, but it's not going to have punk rock shows.
Right. No, and the Reeves isn't either. No, I love the Reeves, and I love going to shows there. And, you know, I've been to a couple there now, and everyone I've seen, I've had an absolute blast. Yeah. It's just been fantastic. It sounds great. You know, it's just a cool vibe, a great venue, but you don't have, for like underground music, you're just not going to get it there. Yeah. You know, and, you know, Wilkesboro's kind of had a couple places kind of off and on. There was Sharky's. The one show that Indeval played there was, we called it the Buddha Fest. So there used to be this dude, his name was Jason Yell, and everybody called him Buddha because he was like 6'3", and basically he looked like Buddha. Yeah, huge fucking dude. And he was such a fan of Indeval, he got Indeval tattooed on his chest, you know. And one day, like for his birthday, he was like, man, he worked at this club called Sharky's, and Sharky's would have shows. They'd have like another band that was from Wilkesboro that did good in kind of like the Piedmont, totally different musical genre. Was 3/4 Dead. They, you know, they played like more radio based metal and you know, stuff of that nature. Which we were all really good friends with those dudes, but you know, Indeval played, you know, like underground metal, you know, and anyways, so. You know, they would play there some, and other bands would come through there and stuff like that. The Independents played there before, and you know, so they had cool bands come through, and but we just wouldn't. We like, for whatever reason, me and Tommy had this like big stigma about like, we don't play Wilkesboro, we don't do that. Fuck it, you know, that's not part of what we do. And Buddha was like, one day he was like, yeah, man, I'm putting together this show. It's my birthday. It's a festival. I want you guys to play. We're like, oh, you know, we don't do Wilkesboro. And he's like, yeah, but look at this big ass tattoo I got of you guys on my chest. And it's like, I guess we'll play this show. Yeah. You know? But, so we ended up playing it. But I mean, that was an awesome show. Like, it was a great show. It was packed, man. Yeah. And, you know, we were really fortunate. Like, we would play Ziggy's a lot, like the old Ziggy's in Winston-Salem. And a lot of people from Wilkesboro would drive out to see us, man. We'd have a lot of people from Winston, a lot of people from Mount Airy, a lot of people from Wilkesboro. So we would always do good when we would play in Winston and stuff. And you know, so when we actually played in Wilkes, it was a great show. We probably should have done it more than what we did. Yeah. You know? Well,
like we were talking about on that last episode, me and Matt were talking about how when we did that show in Kings Mountain, it was something different. People were sort of hungry for something different. Yes. So you bring it, sometimes it's probably not going to sustain. Like, we couldn't have opened up a punk rock venue in Kings Mountain. There's no way it would have worked. But for one show, it was a lot of people came out and a lot of people had a good time, and it worked.
You know, man, funny that you talk about that because of when we would tour. One of my favorite places to play was always in West Virginia, and one of the reasons why is we would play like Princeton, West Virginia. We would play Charleston a lot. We would play I think it's Huntington, or Huntersville, Huntington, something like that. And Parkersburg. So we would play throughout West Virginia a little bit, and I always really loved playing in West Virginia, and not necessarily in Charleston, which was, of course, the major city in West Virginia, but it was in the smaller towns that I loved playing. And the reason why is you would go there and play, and it would pack out before you would ever even start playing. People would buy tons of merch. I mean, because people had nothing else to do.
Yeah.
So they came to the show. And not only did they come to the show, man, they loved it. They loved the fact that you were there.
You could have an off night in a place like that, and people would still eat it up. I've played in like small places like that, like little towns where we played in the VFW or whatever.
Yeah, oh, dude, I've done so much
kids would eat it up. They would love it.
A lot of the early shows that Naval would play were in VFW halls. Like bands would rent VFW halls all the times. Like you'd have like full East Coast tours or Middle America tours, and half the shows would be in VFW halls, and they would be packed. I mean, I'm not even talking like, 5-10 people. I'm talking like 100 kids plus would come out to these VFW halls and pack them out. And that was awesome. I mean, it always sounded like shit because, it's a VFW.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. The Armory shows that we had, they were the worst sounding shows ever probably, but they were fun.
Yeah. Because
people came out. They were ready to do something in a town that they didn't get to usually do that kind of stuff in.
Yeah. I mean, that whole thing was just completely insane. But it was it really happened a lot, man.
Yeah. So after the end of all, that was your first band.
Yes.
You play what was the next? You said you took a few years off after that, kind of from playing in bands.
Yeah. So I took a couple of years off, and I still traveled a lot. And I worked, building low stores and stuff like that. And then when I finally stopped doing that, I came back home, and it was really funny. Levi, who lives in Charlotte, and from Space Wizard. And, Levi was playing in the band. And I heard a lot of people be like, "Oh man, they're trying to sound like Naval and blah 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 blah." And I was like, I'm gonna go check this band out and see what's up with them. So I go check them out, and then a couple months later, they had an open slot for guitar player, and I was like, "Hey man, you guys are doing something that I'm familiar with, and kind of my neck of the woods. Would you care if I played?" And they took me in. This is how I met Daniel.
Mm-hmm.
And that band, I think it was originally called Witness to Murder or something like that, like something incredibly generic. You know, and it, and that's kind of what we're doing. We weren't really trying to do anything crazy. We were just having fun with it, playing crazy parts and breakdowns and stuff like that. And then Daniel left after about a year or so being in that band, and he went on to play in two other bands before we circled back around, because when he left, how I met Daniel Biggins is that he was the drummer for this band.
Yeah.
And so when he left, we were without a drummer in a real small town where there's no drummers, So it took a while to find someone to replace him. We found a guy, his name was Derek, and Derek was good, but he couldn't really do shows and couldn't really do a lot of things, and Derek ended up leaving. And when before Derek ended up leaving, I worked with Jonathan's dad, and me and him would talk, and his name was David, and David would be like, "Hey man, would you come and jam out with my son? I think he's a good drummer. He shows a lot of potential and stuff like that." I was like, "Yeah, sure."
Yeah.
And I recorded Jonathan's first band, which was called Security and Wisdom, and he was like 14 years old. He was really young.
Yeah.
And it wasn't long after doing the recording that happened, where our drummer left, and I was like, "You're a really good drummer, dude. You want to come and jam with us and just do this for a little bit?" And he did, and it kind of worked out for a little while. And about around that time was the time that me and Jonathan was talking about, like, man, we want to, like, I love rock and roll. I don't want to play anything too complex. I don't want to play anything that I got to think too much about.
Yeah.
I just want to go have a lot of fun.
Yeah.
And Jonathan and Daniel, actually, ironically enough, were the ones that first started talking about doing the Seduction together. And, I think it started with Daniel posted a band that was like a really good, like, kind of fast forward rock and roll band, sort of like what Seduction would become.
Yeah.
And Jonathan replied, and they started talking through Facebook or whatever, and drugged me into it, and then was like, all right, let's make a band here, and so that's how it kind of came to be. It was a couple of years apart from each other. I'd say probably like in total 4 or 5 years apart from each other.
Yeah.
But and then again, Daniel was me, Jonathan, and Daniel were all from like hardcore underground backgrounds, but we'd all been raised on like classic rock and all these things. Like Jonathan's dad was like really big into Zeppelin and Iron Maiden and Black Sabbath, and by proxy, Jonathan grew up learning how to play drums to John Bonham and all these guys, and that's the reason why he became the drummer that he is, because that was his upbringing, and that's what he learned how to play with, and so we all had a familiar background and then upbringing. That was kind of the basis of the Seduction when we really first started going. And our very first record, which is the one that we don't really promote, it's almost poppy in that context, because we were really trying to hone in on like more of a classic 70s, like Thin Lizzy, very almost pop rock vibe. And what we become really more known about, which was the record that would become after that, which was the self-titled one, or not self-titled, but You Catch Fire. Yeah. And
that's a great record.
Well, thanks. But and that whole thing came out of playing like venues like Somersel's Tavern in Greensboro, where people just weren't coming out, and we were just getting frustrated and pissed, and starting to come out. When we would practice, we'd have these riffs where we'd be fucking mad or whatever, and our background from what we were raised with to what we played with all them years started kind of blending and forging into each other, and it kind of came out in that format.
Yeah.
So that was a cool experience, and it was a good blend. It was a good molding of the two.
Yeah. So did you record that record, or was that before you started recording?
I did record that record. That was starting with like Volga. That's the first track off of it. But do you just play music, or?
I usually put it in like a post.
I've got a bloodlust I can't quench. I've tried, trust me, I've tried. Can't seem to satisfy my flesh. Sailed the world seeking destruction. Come on, sure you'd better be running. If not, I'll be drinking from your skull. Arms by your side, crack the ribs from your spine. You got wings, but you can't fly. Yeah. You can't stop this. Why even try? I come to take your life.
So, Volga, which is the first track off of that record. So that record was done in 4 different parts, and it was really interesting how we did that record. So our concept with that record, like the record before that, we wanted to like really polish it and really produce it and really take our time with it. And we did. We took forever with it, and you can hear it, man. I mean, like, especially given the fact that I wasn't good at what I was doing at the time.
Yeah.
It sounds. I mean, it holds up. It sounds really good. Yeah. But starting with You Catch Fire, we really wanted to break away from that. We really wanted to be more of a live band than like build it all piece by piece in the studio. And so we developed this concept where we're like, well, we're going to do this record in 3 or 4 different sessions. And for each session, we're going to use different guitars, different amps, different drums. And so in between each session, we would sell off whatever we were using and get different equipment. And we did that for the entire record. So,
wow.
Yeah, it was a really kind of crazy experience that we would hodgepodge things together, and make different kits or whatever. And we did that through the whole thing. And it was really kind of incredible. But the first 4 tracks was Volga, Rules of Enslavement, Irish Flu, and God, I can't remember the other one now. But anyways, that was the first 4 tracks. And they sound, if you listen to the record as a whole and you pull those 4 tracks out, you can hear it. You can hear that those were the first 4. And they're very different sounding. Like the snare is totally detuned. Like it's just a flat thud.
Yeah.
You know, everything's very flat sounding, but that was what we were going for. We wanted that sound for those first 4 songs. We wanted like a very dry, very thuddy, very like flat 70s sound, but with more gain.
Yeah.
You know, and that kind of set the way for the rest of the record and what we would write after that, because like we'd only had those first 4 songs written when we started recording it, and everything we would write in between it and stuff like that. And the other songs, like I think the next session was like Daughter of a Holy Man and Starmageddon and a couple other songs, and you can hear like those are more roomy, they're a little more well developed as far as like the recording quality and stuff like that goes. But at that time, that's what we wanted for those. So I mean, it was an interesting blend. And then when the record was done, and I sat down with it and tried to figure out like, well, how do I make this all sound like it was a record? You know, put it all back together instead of something that was drug apart or drug out over the course of a year. You know, that was pretty interesting. So I would go back into these old sessions and remix them a little bit and stuff like that, and then we sent it all off together and had it mastered. Jamie King did that at record for us. He mastered the final recording of it, and I was pretty happy with how it turned out. There's a lot of times I think about like, man, you know, in a lot of ways I kind of like to re-record some of this just to hear, you know, knowing what I know how to do now. And you know,
I think most bands are, and I can especially imagine with you as you've learned more with the recording process. But like most bands would love to go back and record early material and just do it a little bit better. Yeah. But especially I can imagine you being all hands on with the entire process.
I mean, I can do a lot with mixing, but yeah, it would be a totally different experience because it's night and day from what I've learned from that point to now. You know, it's been several years, and it would be a totally different sounding record. And honestly, I don't know if that's a good thing. Part of what makes it work is how it sounds. You know, and you got to accept that. You got to understand that. You know, it sounds really flat compared to what you could do now, but that's kind of cool. That's kind of what it is, you know.
I mean, I think most bands, every record's going to have its own little sound anyway. Yeah. You can get better as a band, and you can get better at recording. Yes. But it doesn't, like, discount the previous recordings. No. You know, everything has its place, and a lot, like you said, if you go back and re-record it, it might not necessarily be a better thing. Right. You might have better equipment, and you might be more technically better at doing everything that you do, better at playing the music or whatever. Yeah. But you might not have that same feel to it.
Right. Absolutely. And that's kind of how I feel about it. Like there's if I could go back and re-record any of the Seduction stuff, it would probably not be that record. It would probably be the Bad Seeds on Fertile Ground, the record that would follow.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I think that record sounds phenomenal. But
see, that's just one of them things. So the reason I say that is that I look back on some of the guitar tones that we got and some of the bass tones, and I don't think that we captured truly what we were aiming for. Like, it's in the ballpark. It's close enough to say, like, hey, this is a record, you know. But if I could go back and redo it now, there's things that I know that I would fix about it. But, with the record before You Catch Fire, like I said, we were kind of at our own time. You know, we would do it in parts and release those parts, and and then had the album. So there was no big pressure for it. And then with You Catch Fire, with that record, or not You Catch Fire, but Bad Season Fertile Ground. With that record, we had. So we'd been playing Raleigh, and we'd met Ralph from Rusty Knuckles. Yeah. And Ralph's a great dude. Love Rusty Knuckles. Great group of guys. And Ralph had been coming to a lot of our shows, and I told Daniel, I said, this dude's going to sign us, you know. And sure enough, I think it was like in January, before the record came out, he hit us up like, hey, man, what are you doing about your new record? What are you working on? And Daniel was like, well, we're working on a record. And Ralph was basically like, well, let me put it out, let's sit down and talk. And so we did, and we decided to go with Ralph for Rusty Knuckles. And the thing, however, was that we only had like 3 songs maybe. Yeah. I think we had 2 songs written and a third in the works. And Ralph was like, I want to put it out by this time. And, Ralph always has a big stage for Heavy Rebel Weekender.
Oh yeah.
And in Winston, and he's like, I want to showcase the album on that date. I want that to be like your release show. That'd be a good release show, which is all great marketing, right? You know, really good. However, the problem is that this January and that's July, and the finished product needed to be done April.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah.
And in order to be able to get it pressed and get the artwork done and everything done that needed to be done.
Yeah.
So basically, all of a sudden we went from kind of having as much time as we wanted to having no time at all.
Yeah.
And what ended up happening was like we had to work so hard and wood shop it so much and just try to like fast forward through a lot of songs and ultimately at the end of the day that created some conflict. It created some things that would go on to persist in the band. Like I talked about earlier, I feel, and I have no quarrels about this. I feel like it put a big tax on Daniel vocally.
Yeah.
Coming up with the lyrics, it put a tax on all of us. Writing songs like. Daniel was always the core songwriter in the Seduction. Like he had more of that kind of like swing groove, which is kind of our staple. And I was more always straightforward, like metal sounding and stuff like that, And, so it put a big crunch on everybody, as far as like churning out stuff to contribute that was well enough to stick to it, as far as that goes. And we ended up with more songs that were... which is what I wanted, and I had expressed it before we ever even got into this. I wanted more songs that was more punk driven, more kind of like that upbeat pace that we did. Because like one, I love playing those live, and two, I always felt like the audience really responded well to those. So I mean, it was kind of catering to that in some aspects, and. But there was a lot of stuff that I think that in the long run, if we could have went back and developed and worked more on, they would have ended up better.
Yeah. I get that. I guess like as a listener, it goes to prove my point when like we were talking earlier about how the last CD, I'm happier with it than Ben was ultimately. That, at the end of the day, as a listener, you're not going to notice the things that as a performer and the person that recorded that music is going to notice and get down on yourself about. Because I listen to that record and I go, damn, if it was being better than this, it would.
Right.
I mean, I can't imagine, but but I'm not going to hear that guitar tone the same way you're going to hear that guitar tone. So I get that, wanting to be completely happy with the thing that you recorded.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, for yourself, you want to be happy. But the listener's not going to really notice that so much.
And,
That's when you get nitpicky on yourself, and I get that. As a performer, I definitely get that.
Yeah, and, that's ultimately a thing. It's that's a deep, dark hole to be cautious of,
Yeah.
It's kind of like the abyss, You can pick yourself to death and lock yourself up in a project that you never get through with.
I mean, you can make Chinese democracy if you want to.
Yeah.
Or you can come in here and you can knock out, 12 songs in a day and go, oh, well, it is what it is, but I got a record out.
Yeah, I mean, the difference is that, what was it? Chinese democracy took like 10 years, 15 years, something like that. And Appetite for Destruction was recorded in 2 weeks.
Yeah. And which one's the better record?
Right. I don't think anybody's going to argue that with you. And so, I mean, ultimately, that that's kind of the nature of it, And... I look back on it and there's some tracks, some like Undercover Darkness on that record.
Yeah,
I am totally happy with how
that's my favorite song.
I think it's one of the best songs on it, man. It kind of captivated the entire mood that we were going for. It's a little chaotic, it's a little big, it's a little it's a little unhinged sounding all the way through, but it's great quality, And that song was the first. I remember mixing that record, and that was the first one that I got right. And I was thinking, like, if I can make the whole rest of the record sound like this, I'm going to be so stoked.
Yeah.
And I felt like I fell short. You know what I'm saying? Like, there's other ones like Small Town Disorder. It's right up there with that as far as that. And there's some other ones on there that are really good, but I felt like, the tone was lacking, or maybe we should have spent more time developing, than what we did. But it's a great record, and I don't regret it in any shape or form. I will, hindsight being, 2020 or whatever, I wish we had spent a little more time with it.
Yeah.
But we were up against this deadline, and, ultimately at the end of the day, we could have pushed it, man. But we felt like, oh, let's do this. Let's hit this, let's do this thing, But, I'm happy with it.
Yeah.
Long story short.
It's a great record for sure.
Scratched out another page. Doesn't matter anyway. Never wanted to wait. I just wanted to play. And my
So what made you? I mean, what was the first thing you recorded? Did you start recording fairly early, or did you start recording because? Or what made you decide to? Did you go to school for it?
No, Lord, no. I thought about it. I actually went to Full Sail and did a tour, and was hook, line, and sinker everything except for moving down there. And Full Sail's a multimedia school in Orlando, Florida. One of the biggest things they're most famous for is either movie production or recording. So I went there and was blown away by the facilities. The guys were great. They were really nice. But one of the things that kind of really always caught me off guard, and looking back on it, I don't know what I was expecting them to say. They were like, well, if you come here, the biggest thing that you can ever do for yourself is to network. Is to talk to people, make friends. Because ultimately, at the end of the day, they don't do any type of job placement. So, you graduate Full Sail and you're $80,000 in debt and you don't even know where to begin to start, And that's kind of one of the things. And when I came back home, and me and Jenny was talking about it, my wife, and it's like, well, for $80,000, I could do a lot. For $80,000, I could build a studio. Yeah. And I could build not just a studio, I could really build a studio, like a crazy studio. And I could grind it out and learn because, I learned a lot by being relentless. Always looking online, always researching. There's a really great, for anybody that's listening that wants to get into it, that's even curious, there's a website called Gear Sluts. Okay. And Gear Sluts is based around recording, but, as the name would lead you believe, it's about people that are obsessed with gear. Yeah. But, there's a lot of people that get on there and they talk about recording techniques. And I would get on there and I would dig through, I had a ritual. It was 3 or 4 hours long every night. So basically it was like being in school, and I would get on there and I would read and read and read and read and read. And I would take snippets where someone was like, well, my bass was boxy in this mix, so I cut at, 400 hertz. And I would take that and I would copy it and I would keep it in a Word file under bass. Yeah. And basically I put together a book for myself on these are things to do, to look for. If these are the scenarios that you encounter. And, so I kind of developed it that way instead of going to school. Going to school would have probably got me to this point faster, but I don't think it would have been any better. Yeah. Because at this point, if something goes wrong on my rack, I can pull out that preamp and I can take it apart and troubleshoot it. Or, if there's a problem, I could probably fix it faster in the mix than what I would have if I went to school, because I've done it so much now that I know where things are, truly know where things are.
You really, rather than, school doesn't really teach you things from the ground up. They teach you, basically, this is how you do things now. Right. You've learned pretty much from the ground up. And and really, with the internet, if you want to do something, you can find out how to do it.
Yeah, it's all there. You just got to be willing.
You just got to be willing to dedicate yourself to do it.
That's absolutely right.
School, there's something to be said for school, I guess, but you don't have to go to school to be able to do what you do.
No. And that's the whole thing. And, when I was really thinking about going to Full Sail, I was researching online about, on these music forums that I was part of. There used to be this one, it was Andy Sneeb's. And Andy Sneeb would record and mix, a lot of just incredible sounding metal records. And he would get on there and talk to you. He was very personable. And, there would often be polls, other people like me, being young, really into this, really want to pursue the ideal of it, and not knowing where to start, and often think about going to school for it. And overwhelmingly, there was never any poll or any thread that was started like that in these musical forums or whatever, where people were like, yeah, you go to school. They were always like, do not do it. Yeah. Because you're going to end up in debt, and you're going to be fighting an uphill battle the entire time for it. And that always kind of resonated. And ultimately, I like the fact that it was I learned the hard way, and I learned building it from the ground up and stuff like that. And I'm still not where I want to be, not even close. But I feel comfortable with what I do now, and I have a lot of pride in it. Every recording I do, I hang my name on it. I never don't promote it. I'm absolutely horseshit at social media. I am god awful at it. And so, I stay busy because bands like you guys, y'all talk and you other people hear your recordings and they ask and they hit me up. You know, I've had bands come here because Van Huskins record.
Yeah.
You know, it means everything to me, you know.
But like anybody that ever comes to record with you says the same things we do.
Yeah.
So easy to work with, such a great guy. He's got great stories. He makes it so relaxed, and that sounds great. I mean, ultimately it sounds really good at the end. That's the main thing. But the fact that the whole process is so simple and so much fun, it makes it that much better.
Well, see, and I love that, man. And like, you know, I've talked to you about it before. Like, I've been in studios where you got guys watching the clock, you know, and every second that ticks by, they're counting money up, you know.
Yeah.
And that's not my thing, you know. I don't do that. I don't believe in that. I really like for things to be very low key, and I want people to come in and drink a little bit or whatever, you know, and enjoy what they do here, you know. I mean, the studio is stressful, man. Like, I don't care what studio you go to. I mean, you can be a band that's come here, and unless you've been here 100 times, you know, the only person I can really think of that would come here and be like, I'm not stressed out at all at this point, it would probably be Daniel.
Daniel, yeah.
Yeah, you know, but there's always a little bit of stress, a little bit of anxiety with it, you know, and, you know, a lot of times that can get in the way of playing, you know what I'm saying? Like, and I want people to come in, crack a beer, smoke a cigarette, take your time, man, let's not worry about it, let's talk, bullshit, have a good time with it, and when we get to playing, you're going to be more comfortable about playing, you're going to have a fun playing, we'll joke, if you mess up, let's crack a joke at it, let's solo out Ben, you know, and hear him grunt, you know, and laugh about it.
You're going to play better if you're having fun,
absolutely,
than you are if you come in here and you're all stressed out. So and it makes it so much easier.
90% of my work, man, is making you guys feel comfortable. You know, it's really funny because you would think, and I'm sure everybody believes this, you know, unless they own a studio, and then if you own a studio, you know it's the truth, whether you say it or is or not. But if you come in and you're comfortable and you kill it and you're having a good time, your takes are better. And if your takes are better and you play better and you do better, then my job's easy.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I'm saying? I mean, it all lines up, you know. So, and that's so important, you know. And I'll, again, you know, I love hanging out with the band. I live in a small town, obscured, and I'm away from the scene. You know, I like to get to Charlotte when I can, but I got a wife and a kid and a full-time job, and I don't get down there as much as I like to, you know.
I've been there. I understand what it's like.
Yeah. You know, I'm not 17 years old. When I was 17, I used to live in Winston practically, going to music, you know, venues and stuff. But that's past me. So, you know, my best chance to do that now is actually here. Yeah. You know? And so, you know, I enjoy bands coming to record just as much as anything else, you know, because I get to talk and I get to learn about, well, what's going on, who's doing what in the scene and what's happening in it. You know?
And you get a performance right in your basement.
That's right, man. I mean, and that's badass, you know. I get a ground level view at what's going on with the music, you know. Before anybody else hears it, I get to hear it.
And we certainly can't do it without people like you. I mean, you know, we'd love to see you. Well, you are still in the music scene. Yeah. We'd love to see you more out of shows more often, but, you know, as long as you're doing this stuff here, that's... Well... Everybody's got to find a way to be involved. And so, like I said, you know, I was out of it for a while. Yeah. But it came back around to where my daughter's older now, and I've got a little bit more freedom. So I'm back out there again. But I've been there and done that, and I wasn't as involved as you are now.
Here's my empty bottle love song, short and sweet, so it won't take too long. Just had to tell you that I think we did it right. I'll work hard every day, as long as I can get drunk with you tonight.
I always dreamed of having a label. What I really wanted is I wanted a studio that was intertwined with the label. Yeah. That I could like offer this thing to bands where like I could record you and it'd kind of be an in-house thing, and you know, like kind of help people get a leg up on stuff, because like one of the things that I've seen a lot in North Carolina, especially during the era of the Seduction, was man, Charlotte's got a scene. Yeah. Like, it's got a great scene. It's not just like it's got a scene that's Charlotte. They got a scene that would be compatible with any place else in this country. Mm-hmm. But for whatever reason, it feels often like North Carolina's North Carolina is overlooked.
Oh, it is. It's overlooked within itself as well.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. People in Winston have no clue what's going on in Charlotte.
Yeah.
People in Raleigh have no clue what's going on in Charlotte.
I have no clue what's going on in other scenes. I'm learning that very quickly.
Yeah. Well, one of the strangest things, and everybody in Raleigh that I'm friends with might despise me for saying this, but I cannot for the life of me understand why in the world Raleigh is labeled as the music scene or city for North Carolina.
Yeah.
Because I don't see it. And I've played in Raleigh, my whole life. 20 years now, I've been playing shows in Raleigh, and I'm not saying that they're bad, but I'm just saying it's not the same as if you come to Charlotte or go to Asheville.
Yeah.
If you're in North Carolina, man, you got 3 places. You got Wilmington, you got Charlotte, and you got Asheville.
Yeah.
Those are the best scenes in North Carolina by far, in my opinion. And the Charlotte scene is just incredible. It's chock full of great musicians.
There's so much variety.
Great variety, good bands, well-written songs. You know what I'm saying? I always just kind of when I first started the studio, that was kind of the ideal. I'll start a studio. I'll learn how to record. I'll do a label. I'll do whatever. And as time went on, I just realized the studio is enough work by itself. I'm not worried about labels. I'm not worried about doing things of that nature.
You don't want to go into debt.
Right, yeah.
You don't want to go into that much debt. Because
you're
not going to make
for the studio. So
you're not going to make your money back from a label, these days at least, anyway.
No, and, it's kind of one of them things. And I'm not the best at networking. I'll meet people and learn people and make friends, but I'm never the first to talk. And it's not that I don't mean to be.
I'm getting better at that with this whole thing. That's something I'm working on. But it's hard.
If there's anything I've learned, as far as on not recording wise, but as far as playing shows, that's the most important part.
Mm-hmm. It is.
It is important. And if anybody's listening to this that is in a band, I cannot stress how important it is to network with your peers.
Network, build relationships too. Yeah. I say beyond networking, build relationships, because that's one of the things that I get out of this more than anything. I enjoy playing, and I enjoy playing for people. I enjoy being on the stage, but I really enjoy the friendships that I've acquired through being in the scene.
Well,
and those bonds that we build with certain bands just because we played with them so much, or because we like to go to each other's shows sometimes too. But it's about the relationships.
I've told that to people. I talked to Jacob when Jacob was gearing up to leave the Seduction. The dude was so cool about it. He let us know, look, man, I'm thinking about taking my step out. And, all that. And, I told him, I was like, one of the most important things that you're going to get from this is the friendship.
Yeah.
All the rest of the stuff is all bullshit. It'll wash aside. It won't mean a whole lot in the end. But what you'll walk away with is friends.
Yeah.
Friends that you're going to keep for the rest of your life. You're going to, me and you will be friends, me and you and Daniel, and we're all going to be really good friends for the rest of our lives, and that's ultimately it, I've got friends in the Charlotte scene that maybe I don't talk to for 7-8 months, but if I went to Charlotte right now and called them up, they'd be like, dude, come on, and that's it, and it's so important, and this is a great way to do that, and I love that, man. It's just like Nick, me and Nick Pugh, I've talked about him a couple times tonight. We text back and forth all the time. If we don't talk to each other in a month span, Nick will just out of the blue hit me up and say something about how Billy Joel sucks or whatever, because I think Billy Joel's all right, but
I've gotten a little bit of an appreciation for him in recent times.
Man, he's good. I'm one of these days. Nick don't even know it's going to happen yet, but I'm going to talk Nick into covering a Billy Joel song. He won't even realize it's happening until it's over.
Yeah,
but yeah. And he's all the time hey man, come down to Charlotte, let's hang out. And I love that, man. I love the fact that I've got friends. And maybe I don't get to see them every day. Maybe I don't get to hang out with them and talk to them the way that I wish that I could. But, between the studio and playing live, man, that little bit of networking that I've done, I've made real friends that I will keep, And
that's the older we get, the more we realize that our friends aren't people that we necessarily talk to every day. It's not like we were when we were in high school and we talked to these people all the time. Friends are people that you can go to after 6 months, after a year, and be like, you hadn't even missed a beat.
Right, absolutely.
And that's the kind of friends that I have in this community. And if I need to reach out to somebody, I know who's going to have my back.
Yeah.
whether it be to hook up a show or whether it be because I've got a problem. You know, I know who I can trust.
Right.
And I've gained a lot of really good friends out of this whole thing, and that's the biggest thing. I said that show recently. I was telling somebody that, you know, as much as I love playing the shows, I said this, and I just kind of made a gesture. This is what it's all about. Like everybody just hanging out, having a good time, talking after the show.
See, that's perfect. We were talking about. I mean, it's been a little while back now about how like you know, the attendance in shows have declined, and part of it is because of the internet. You can watch a concert.
Yeah.
You know, Saturday night you want to watch a show, throw on YouTube. Watch your favorite band.
Oh, there's some great
right.
Full concerts on YouTube.
Right. But at the same time, you're not going to go to YouTube and meet somebody who you end up being one of your best friends for the rest of your life.
Or even just that random conversation you have for that one night, that one person you never see again in your life.
Oh, man. I'm reluctant to say, like, I think younger generation, because that makes me sound like some old, like, ignorant person, because it's not a younger generation thing. But I don't think there's been as much emphasis. Like, back in the day, there was an emphasis on shows, right? Mm-hmm. Like, you knew if you went to a show, anything was possible. Like, anything could happen. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? Like, watch Detroit Rock City. That's a very fictional, contrived thing. But at the same time...
It's very true.
It's very true. This is very much the ideal of, like, going to, like, this crazy show that maybe you shouldn't go to. Maybe it was dangerous. Maybe
exactly. That was part of it.
You know what I'm saying?
So, yeah, we definitely want to talk about Graves of Gods a little bit. Because that's probably, I mean, other than maybe, I'm sure we can talk about Studio Album.
Graves of Gods is who I'm playing with now. The members are Adam Cody, which a lot of people will recognize him from either Columns or Glass Casket or Wretched. Adam's our official rock star in the band.
Yeah.
There's me. There is Jeremy Stowers, who also played in Vol. He was the drummer for the first Vol record. And then he went on to play in Deathblow, which was like a hardcore North Carolina band. And then Steve Poe, which is also from the Charlotte scene, from like Year of the Ox and Musket.
Oh yeah. So he's based out of Statesville, Charlotte, just kind of wherever.
We're based out of Winston, technically speaking, but like Steve lives in Noda, and I live here in Elkin.
Yeah.
And Adam lives basically right outside of Winston, but we practice in Winston. So we just say we're based out of Winston. And it's a very sludge, doom kind of thing. And we try to tie in other elements, other things, like we got a few stoner rock parts in there. We got a few black metal parts in there and stuff like that. So, I mean, if you're into that whole category of metal, there's a little something in there for everyone, you know?
Oh, yeah.
A little chaotic stuff. You know, it's... we've released a couple songs. If you want to check one out, the one I would recommend is probably Empty Spaces. I made like a short video clip of like just oddball things that I found online and kind of spliced them together, which I've had some really interesting feedback about. I've had people tell me that made them feel really uncomfortable watching. And that's great, because that's what I was going for. I was going for I'll never forget, man. I was young, and my friend went to I went with them to this obscure record store in Winston, and there was like this weird Nine Inch Nails VHS cassette tape for sale. And actually, I've been reading a lot of stuff, and it's popped back up in my newsfeed on Facebook recently, where Trent Reznor was talking about that. Apparently, he made these like pseudo snuff films.
Yeah.
And he made like 14, 15 copies, something like that, and he gave them out to his friends, and each one was watermarked in a different way, so making sure that nobody would give them out. And then the dude from Butthole Surfers made copies of his and gave them out.
Of course, yeah.
Right, and that became the videotape that my friend bought, and none of those tapes were actually officially released, even though they were actually from Trent Reznor from Nine Inch Nails. Those are one of the most uncomfortable things I've ever watched in my life. Like, they make you feel very odd and weird watching them. And I kind of want to captivated that in that song, even though we didn't film anything. It was all shit I just ripped off of YouTube and stuff like that. But, and kind of spliced it together. But, if it makes people feel uncomfortable, then that's perfect. That's exactly what I wanted.
Well, I think one thing about doom metal in general is that really good doom metal makes you feel a little bit on edge, a little bit uncomfortable. There's something about it that just makes you feel like this is like, if there is an evil that exists, a real good doom metal band should convey that.
There's two genres that really falls into for me, man. And you're gonna think I'm absolutely insane, but doom metal's one.
Yeah.
Like, I think if the devil is real, he's listening to doom metal. And the other one is big band. Like 1940s, 1930s big band music. Man, you ever listen to those dudes, man? Like, those guys are pretty evil sounding, man.
Yeah, there's some stuff going on in those songs.
There's some weird stuff in there, man. But I've always felt like that. But
it does kind of sound like the soundtrack to hell in a way, you know?
Right. You're like, listen to Scroll Note Zippers, man, and the Hell's a Poppin' and stuff like that. And Doom's kind of like that, man. It's like, I remember being like 16, 17 years old and going out to this old abandoned church that had been forgotten about like a long time ago, and a graveyard and like a thunderstorm in the background, blaring, war pigs or something in the background. And there's nothing, you can't listen to anything that sounds as dark and as just looming as that old Sabbath. Like that really doomy sounding Sabbath stuff.
It's just like, to say doom, that song is impending doom, really.
That's it, man. That was it. You knew what you were getting into.
Yeah.
And, like I said, 12 o'clock at night, you're all by yourself, you're out at this old church, there's a graveyard, there's a lightning storm in the background. All of a sudden, this music that you were just listening to becomes more than just music. All of a sudden, it sounds very, like, 3D and tangible.
Yeah.
Like, it's all around you, And, so, that's kind of always been my thing with Doom. And, I dig Doom and I love Doom and stuff like that. I've always tried to figure out a way to cross-pollinate, like, Doom and rock and roll, and I'm not even sure if that's even technically possible. Outside of just being Black Sabbath, but
I was gonna say I can hear it, but you just said it, Black Sabbath.
And that's it. So we're sticking pretty much to our guns and sludge. That's as close as we can get to it, man. We're very Crowbar inspired, and if you dig anything like that, that's where we're at. I throw a lot of chaotic sounding background noises in it. It's very Sepultura Chaos AD, Converge inspired chaotic parts in the background. So, it's Doom for people in that same kind of category that want to sit down and listen to something real dark sounding while at the same time, having something up front that's a little unhinging. So that's it. We're currently recording our new record, and I've got the drums done for it. I'm hoping to have the guitars done in the next couple of weeks and be on the vocals, and I'm thinking at this point, just kind of taking our time. We're looking at maybe May, June for a release. I think I've actually mentioned every one of them except for the Body Bags. And
I thought about that a while ago. I was like, shit, I need to mention Body Bags because I love those guys.
Yeah, this is the song that I selected from them because, I love this song. This is the one. It's such a good song.
I must bear, wherever I go, you're always there. Down in the dark, I got you by the heart. You wanna run away, but I'm here to stay. Sooner or later, you will see that you will never be free from me. Day and night, you lie awake. You pray to God as your body shakes. You feel a call from the abyss as you fade in and out of consciousness and when my clock.
The lineup they got right now is fucking awesome.
Yeah,
Those guys are killing it.
Yeah.
Those guys are killing it right now.
I was fucking with them when they were up here. I was like, hey, man, if you want to get rid of Dusty, man, holler at me. Because, like, that's the type of punk I grew up with, man.
Your fault, you're burning in the flames. Your mental force is beyond your kin, and now you have to pay for your sins. So drop to your knees, try to repent, but you can never escape this labyrinth. Cause even if you had 100 Bibles, wouldn't have your chances of survival. The shadow that we share is the curse that I must bear. Wherever I go, you're always there. Down in the dark, I get you by the heart. You wanna run away, but I'm here. Sooner or later, you will see that you will never be free from me. Go ahead and scream. Nobody's listening. Go ahead and scream. Just like you mean it. They're gonna call the priest. Cause they found you in the bed with a beast. Sooner or later they will see that your God has left the building. The shadow that we share is the curse that I must bear. Wherever I go, you're always there. Always there. Down in the dark, I get you by the heart. You wanna run away, but I'm here. Sooner or later you will see that you will never be free from me.
You know, we wanted to hit all the things that matter to us, like, which is Thin Lizzy, Motorhead, early Metallica, like Kill 'Em All era Metallica, and punk, you know, and I felt like we did pretty good at covering those grounds, you know, and I miss that, man. I do. I miss, you know, and me and Dan, we talk about it, you know, sometimes, and we both, you know, I miss that.
Yeah.
You know, there was a certain energy about that. You know?
Well, maybe we can all hold out hope that someday something will happen. That's all. I'll just leave it at that. So,
well,
but we don't have to even say anymore. I don't.
Well, we talked about it earlier, and Dan can kick me later if he wants to. I don't know. We've talked about getting back together and maybe doing a show or two and recording some new stuff. I don't know whether it'll happen or not. It's just all speculative at this point. But you know, kind of going back to what I was saying earlier, like, I really want to see what I could do right now if I had a new Seduction song to record. Like, something that I knew within myself, like, this is the vision that I want. This is what I want it to sound like.
This has been a Gabba Gabba Hunt Media Production.